Faculty of Management Sciences, Alex Ekweme Federal University, Ntufu Alike, AE-FUNAI, Ebonyi State, Nigeria, organizes her first international conference, FMS 2021, with the theme SDGs and COVID-19, mainstreaming resilience and sustainable economic transformation in Africa. Venue, Theatre Arts Auditorium, AE-FUNAI. Date, October 13th to 15th, 2021.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Dean of the Faculty, Professor Femi Adeyeye. You're welcome, sir. Please, sir, may you come to the head table. We also want to invite the Deputy Director of the Center for Educational Services, Dr. Charles Obekirigwe, to relocate to the head table. You're welcome, sir. Dean, sir, for your information, while you were at the meeting, we have finished one paper delivered by the representative of Professor Afam Ituma, the Vice Chancellor of Go City University. It was presented by Dr. Ernest Emeka Ezeoha, who presented a paper on publishing in top-tier premier journals, the tactics. It was an interesting one. And we are waiting for the DVC administration, Professor Abel Ezeoha, who will be presenting his own based on research and methodology. You're welcome, sir. DJ, continue with slide. Hello. We welcome the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration, Professor Abel Ezeoha. You're welcome, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, the stage Ladies and gentlemen, the stage is set for the final session. The stage is set for the final session, and to kickstart the session, I want to invite the Dean of our faculty, Professor Femi Adeyeye, to make a remark. Prof, sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, on behalf of the two of us, the Deputy Vice Chancellor at me and my humble self, we want to sincerely apologize for not being here at the beginning of the program. You will forgive us. It was an emergency meeting, and that was the Senate of the university, so we had no choice rather than to be there. Well, I want to believe you've all enjoyed the lecture of today, even though we've not been able to meet him, And I believe we must have lost a lot. We must have missed so much by not listening to him. However, I still believe we will get the soft copy of the lecture or even the hard copy. Well, everyone is busy, particularly the DVC admin, and he has another meeting, even right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wouldn't want to waste your time. There's so much to say that we as academics, our responsibility are in three folds. There are in three ways: teaching, which we do to you students on a daily basis, then the research, and finally, the community service. But in the contemporary world of academia, it is research, research, and research. There is no university that can be ranked dry if such a university does not engage in serious research work. And that is why the theme of this thing is on the contemporary issue, i.e. that of sustainable development goals and COVID-19. So, ladies and gentlemen, we want you to wait behind, and by tomorrow, well, we are going to hear so much of this. We have a galaxy of very competent and international scholars who will speak with you tomorrow. So, that is those of this university. I beg you, please, and enjoy your stay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The Dean of the Faculty, we thank you for your opening remarks. We want to get into the next topic, which, like I said before, is dealing on research methodology. And we have an academic guru from the faculty who will take us in the lecture. He is roundly qualified to delve into this because from our findings, he has garnered well over 893 citations in the research gate. Can you clap? Clap. It's not easy. So he's a man of experience, and I want to call on the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Administration, Professor Abel Ezeoha, to deliver his lecture. You're welcome, sir.
Thanks for the nice words. Dean, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, Director. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me join the team to apologize for the lateness. In fact, when we wanted to leave, we were told by the Vice Chancellor that the University Senate is over and above every other business of the university. So we had no option than to stay back. So let me join him to apologize. They are putting in the presentation, and I do hope that it will come up soon. On. Why they? Okay. So why they do? I'll quickly talk on assessing data and data analytics in accounting and finance. I've chosen this because I feel it's what concerns all of us, and also because of the overwhelming role of data in research, particularly in our own area. Most of the things we do with data, and the richer the data we have, the who is scrolling? Am I? Oh. The richer the data we have, the higher the quality of research we do. So the first slide here is just showing us what we do with data and what we can do with data. Sometimes we get involved with an analysis that we think require some complexities. Or maybe you look at some publications and they look like they are coming from the blues. That's not out of place. It's just because of the expertise the writers have in terms of using data. And there are lots you can use data to do. I'm sure that some of these diagrams are not strange to you. They are what you see in regular, sometimes high quality research publications. And they are all outcomes of what we do with data. So are we moving? So if we look at this, sorry, this appears tiny, but you get the presentation thereafter. If you look at this is the process of research from the beginning to the end. And if you look at standard definition of research, it starts with data and ends with data. In which case, everything we do about scientific research has to do with data. So data and data-related issues matter because they dominate the entire research process. Okay, and the science of research is all about data. What's the quality of data you're using? What is the quantity? And then what is the feasibility or availability or accessibility, as the case may be, of such data? Then the key factors we normally consider in scientific research. Even before you, for my students, I will always advise, before you choose a title, find out whether you have data there, because you can actually get stopped. When you see a beautiful title, you start writing, the literature is there. Maybe you see some good literature from other clients, and you've been able to develop a concept, and it is now time to do the data aspect, only to realize that the data you have proposed are not available. Just usually little you can do because you can't manufacture data. And like I said, it's not just about the data being available, it's also about the authority of the source, where the data will come from, whether you're using primary or secondary data. And then the size of data. When we talk about sample size, population and sample sizes, for instance, the emphasis is usually on the size of data. Okay, even if you're doing primary research and you have to use questionnaire, you have to interview people. The primary emphasis will be your population and then your sample. And you're bothered about the population and sample because of the importance or the role of the size of data that you're going to collect. And like I said, it's not just about the size and structure of the data, it also has to do with the authority. Let's say you want to collect data about the university administration, a case study of AE-FUNAI, and you're asking students, you produce your copies of your questionnaire and you distribute them to students. They will answer your questions. Surely they will do that. You will collect data. But then the big question mark is, how authoritative do students have the authority to answer, to provide the information that you are going to use to inform the basis for your analysis? And the answer is no. Even if you say you're going to target staff, it is not all the staff, all categories of staff that have such capacity. So the authority of your data, if you're using secondary sources and you're looking for, say, economic growth data about Nigeria, and you're collecting it from federal Ministry of Water Resources, for instance, because you could only see it in Federal Ministry of Water Resources. It has a question mark because, yes, it's a federal ministry, but does it have the authority to house or produce such data? And the answer is no. So whether you're using primary or secondary, the authority of the data is very, very important. And then the retractability of the data. Can you actually access the data? And the currency, how current are the data? The most important thing for those of us who use secondary data for research is that it is time-bound, very much time-bound. This is 2021. If you're doing a research and you're using data that ends at 2015 or 2016, calls for a question, even if it is for your thesis or dissertation, the external examiner will ask you to go back and update your data. If it is for publication, the reviewers will ask you why your data ended at 215 or 216. Because your data should mirror what is happening out there in the society. And if you ended at 2015 or 2016, the assumption would be that you have not captured events thereafter up till 2021. And then again, the suitability of the data. And that's where measurement becomes very, very important. That you're measuring, you're using, for instance, when you talk about proxies, for instance, and you are talking about firm performance, it is expected that there are variables that actually measure performance of firms. And unless you are able to collect data upon those variables that actually measure performance, you may not be doing the right thing. So the meaning and nature of data, I'm not sure that's important. Okay. Continue going, sorry. So categorization of data. We have, like I said, we are dealing with in our field, in management sciences, we deal with either primary or secondary. Some of us write theoretical papers that are not quantitative in nature. Maybe you do literature review or a concept note. They are all publishable. They are all very good work, sometimes even more difficult than using data. Those both quantitative and qualitative have equal chances of being published in high-ranked journals for us that are bothered about publishing. So in that sense, we can categorize our data according to by the economic agents that are related to that data, or that generate the data, or that the data consign. In that case, we have broad categorization. We have macroeconomic and microeconomic. And let me tell us that so long as you do research in management and social sciences, you're either using macroeconomic data or microeconomic data. Sometimes we do that unknowingly. If you go about collecting data from individuals, regardless of the topic, you end up with microeconomic data, because you're dealing with microeconomic agents. Individuals are microeconomic agents. And sometimes when you now want to develop your theoretical framework, which is a problem, a mistake also we make. You've used microeconomic data unknowingly, and you want to develop your theoretical framework, and you're using a macroeconomic theory. There's no way macroeconomic theory will explain microeconomic dynamics. So if you're using microeconomic theory, one expects you to, if you're using microeconomic data, by virtue of the fact that you're going to collect your data from individuals or firms, firms are microeconomic agents. Businesses are microeconomic agents. So if you're treating them as individual agents or units, then you're ending up with microeconomic data. And the expectation is that the theoretical framework that explains what you have done would reflect the kind of data that you have used. Then we can also classify data by measurability in terms of quantitative or qualitative. And like I said, though here, because of our inclination, I'm sure that for those of us who are supervising undergraduate and postgraduate students, if a student proposes that he or she is going to do a systematic review, for example, systematic review, meaning that it's going to be purely literature-based research, no data coming in. I'm not sure how many supervisors here will approve that. Not because the student is proposing anything wrong, but because we're not being logical, we need to be coordinated. You need to know how to tell a story. Someone asked me a question some time ago that, he quoted out of context. That is not what the media or what the pressman wrote wasn't what was said. And you begin to ask yourself, who is right? Is it the pressman or the politician? Neither here nor there. Whatever you say in the course of an interview is subject to analysis, and the analysis must have an outcome. So if the pressman will just interview you and record what you said and quote you verbatim, he has done no job. So he must analyze what you said in the context you said it. And even sometimes think beyond what you had in mind that you didn't say and include in the publication. So you must have that expertise to do either of these two. We can also classify according to the instrument we use. We use primary data whereby we collect our data firsthand often using instruments of survey, observation, laboratory experiment, geological survey, and our commonest methods, questionnaires and interviews. I don't know how many of us do research using interviews. The good thing about doing, there's an example I used to give. A friend of mine I met somewhere told me that he published an article in African Affairs. African Affairs is published by Cambridge, and one of the most prominent journals that deal are focused in African issues. So the guy told me that why his paper was as he interviewed one person. Okay, he interviewed just a person, and the view of that single person was analyzed and developed into an article that was accepted by this 3-star journal. And you know the person the guy interviewed, the president of a country. So he interviewed, the president granted him an interview relating to a particular subject matter. So he collected, does he need to interview any other person when he has interviewed the president? So who else could tell him, who else could have more direct information than the president? Maybe when next you design a research, you go and interview Buhari, or even the governor. They won't give you such opportunity. But if even for a minute, but if you ever succeed, the kind of data you have collected is such that every serious-minded journal will appreciate, because they are not easy to come by. And that is why sometimes if you do primary data research very well, it tends to be more convincing than secondary. It's more original, of course, more original. The data you're using do not exist elsewhere before you collected them. Unlike secondary, the case of secondary data. Then secondary data, we know, interestingly, the dynamics is such that even some of the things, sorry to say this, before now we used to have, most of us know about the World Bank Enterprise Survey and doing business, ease of doing business. Some of us know about that. The data in that database were collected through survey, through questionnaire, and structured, cleaned and structured and housed for future research. Some people will ask, are they now primary data or secondary data? And then a good teacher of research will tell you they are secondary data because they are not second-handed. So you can't call them primary any longer. But the point I'm trying to make is that, okay, I refer to that because I think about last month, there were serious issues raised against that database, and World Bank had to declare that they were discontinuing that exercise, that database. So the database is no longer in operation because it was discovered that countries were manipulating their numbers, ease of doing business. So if I can influence the process and manipulate the results coming from my country, people will think that my country is the easiest place to do business, then investors. So you understand the spirit behind the manipulation. So there's high incentive to manipulate such data because that's what investors, that's what researchers use, that's what investors use, So if you manipulate and you get a clean deal, you attract more investment. And then again, it won't surprise you why our country will always contest data from Transparency International, you know. Every year we contest. That is Transparency International. I'm sure it's not strange to you. You've read about the Minister of Information contesting that our ranking corruption index is influenced, it's subjective. But yeah, as much as that is correct to question the accuracy of the data, you ask yourself, if you were to be in the shoes of Transparency International and you have to collect the data, you have to collect the microeconomic data that leads to such index. Wouldn't you rank Nigeria lower than Transparency International is ranking us? Wouldn't you, in all sincerity? You will, because you're seeing it clearly. So even if you deceive investors, even if those World Bank, of course, that's what led to people contesting the validity of the World Bank data. Because investors, when they move to a country, they see a different thing. Yeah, the report said you're very safe to do business. There's no crisis. You could do your business, make as much profit. Your regulatory system is stable, all this. And you use such report to attract investors and they come to see a different thing. Surely they must raise queries. And it is the queries raised by investors that led to the controversy that resulted to World Bank closing that. So we can also classify data by design, cross-sectional time series and panel. Now, if you use survey, you surely generate most of the times, not all the times, cross-sectional data. Okay. I'm not sure the definition is important, but simply what that will result to is that, yeah, you're collecting your data from individual elements at one period in time. But there are some survey designs that resort to panel data. There are some that resort to panel data. For instance, if you do a follow-up, let's say you collect your data at the beginning, baseline survey, and then you administer intervention. Maybe you are training small businesses on bookkeeping, basic bookkeeping principles. So you do your baseline, distribute questionnaire, they fill the copies of questionnaire, you collect, so you know where they are. You are able to ascertain their knowledge level. And upon their knowledge level, you design an intervention. You want to go and teach them how to keep their books. Now, after teaching them, you go back to test whether they've learned. In the end, you generate panel longitudinal data because you've repeated that survey more than a single period. And the data you generate from these processes would be considered longitudinal or panel data. Now, that's a very interesting, particularly for those who do funded research. That's a very interesting design, intervention research. So it's not just about saying, you carry out a study to see whether micro businesses in Igbo know how to keep books, their accounting books, records. That would not be, when you discover the problem, who will provide the solution? So a funder will expect that when you discover the problem, you should be able to provide solution. And the only way to provide solutions some of the times, particularly for such research, is to do intervention research that provides you the opportunity of going back to find out whether there's an impact so if you look at this categorization, we could see the definition represented here in the box. When it is a single entity, the single entity can be an individual, like the case of the president I mentioned, that the guy interviewed, and upon the interview, he generated a good paper published in a 3-star journal. So over a single individual, a single entity, and a single period. That was that guy's case. Why I left that box empty is that it is rare. I've explained it. It is very rare to convince be convincing in scientific research. Even interviewing the president does not provide complete information. So you even need to benchmark the information you collected from the president. And that is why that box here is empty. Not that it is not a design, it's a design. I'm giving you an example. Then if it is multiple entities over a single period, a cross-sectional like we explained, the multiple entities can be individuals, they can be states in Nigeria, they can be local governments in Nigeria, they can be companies, they can just be, entities that are identifiable. Then when you do that, you collect your data from a single entity over multiple periods. That's time series. And most of us that use secondary data are used to the time series type. Although the time series methodology has advanced so much that a lot of people lag behind. So if we use time series, use OLS on time series, I bet you won't get it published anywhere because there are issues associated with the assumptions or the principles of OLS do not usually hold in real life. Or you use multiple entities across multiple time periods, that's panel, which I've explained. And the categorization also continues that we can categorize according to measurement, particularly for those of us that use survey data, maybe data generated from questionnaire. Now, this categorization according to nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio is very, very important because it informs the method that you're using. There are data that can be quantified, so you can use few quantitative methods, but there are those that can't be quantified. So the data treatment, which will inform your methodology, will depend on the kind of data that you have collected. And often you notice that you may, in the course of your interview, collect all these. You collect categorical data, male, female. You may collect, when you use Likert, you collect quantitative data. Sometimes through interview, you can even collect time series data, or maybe not time series, ratios. For instance, when you go, you know that these people don't keep records. The micro businesses, they don't keep records. So you won't talk about any place you can go to collect data about them. And what you do is that you go, let's say you're assessing their profitability. You can go and ask them, how much, assuming they will be sincere, how much profit? Remember, before you give them a questionnaire, you must have convinced them that you're not working for the government. You're not collecting data to now check whether they are paying the right tax or not. So if they are convinced, they might be relatively sincere. So you ask them, how much is your profit? They will give you a range. So you can convert that to a ratio. So it's not that using survey somehow restricts you to any of these class of measurability. But it depends again on how you design your instrument. And the instrument design in terms of collecting primary data is very, very important. Very important. And that is why most supervisors or most reviewers will insist you use validated instrument. The validated instrument could be that, yes, you develop the instrument. Even when you develop an instrument, the instrument must be informed by the theory. If it is not informed by theory, it must be informed by objectives. The objectives that you provided arising from your statement of the problem must be what is driving the instrument or what you use as the basis for designing the instrument. So when you've done that very well, you will know the process of validation. But when, for instance, you're doing a research and someone has done a similar thing and published the instrument, sometimes these days, journal publishers would want you to provide as appendix, as additional submission, some of these things. So you might submit your data, your raw data, you might submit your instrument, as the case may be. Now, if somebody publishes the instrument he or she has used for a similar research, perhaps in a different line, you might get it and adopt it. So, sorry, adapt it. Once you adapt it, then it's the fact that it's published somewhere has given it validation. So if you can use that, or you will notice that there are some intervention agencies who do research, regardless of how elementary their research, and they have instruments that they develop for their data collection. You can just pick any of these and redesign it to reflect what you're doing, because your objectives may not be exactly with theirs. So in which case, if you get such instruments, you mostly have to do some formatting or some adjustments to accommodate your instrument. And we look at the different methods. Okay, we look at the different methods that relate to this kind of the usefulness of some of these classes of data based on measurable scales. So you notice that the ratio element, the ratio scale, is the most effective because you can use that to do all forms of analysis. You can use ratio related data to do all forms of analysis. But if you talk about nominal data, for instance, very limited thing you can do with it. Yeah, you can talk about modes and very elementary descriptive analysis. The same applies to ordinal and interval. The implication of data types on data analysis. Research design is a function of the type of data in question. I hope we know that. Sometimes students battle with what exactly research design is. What exactly research. And the solution is that once you are able to identify from the beginning the type of data you're using, your job of developing the research design session is half done. Because in the end, the research design session will talk about the type of data you're using. Okay? The type of data, the method, the method of generating it, and then the method of analysis. If you are able to condense this as an element or into an element, then you've gotten a complete research design session. Now, if you look at the commonest amongst these that we use quantitatively, though it's too broad to say that your research design is quantitative design. The same way it's too broad to say that your research design is qualitative design. But if you also look at this, some of us who supervise students' projects. These are commonly what we see students describing as their research design. Most of them perform poorly in developing it. So if a student tells you, remember when I say students, I'm not referring to undergraduate students, because the format of our thesis and dissertation is such that you must provide explanations for sessions like this. So it applies to whether you do PhD or you do BSc. If you say that your research design is quantitative, it's not enough. So elementary, just say what the quantitative methods in the work you have chosen to just use the general concept. The same applies to the other books you have here, whether it's SRA or SS particle design. So it's not just enough to mention this and include maybe 2 or 3 lines that they are your research design. So I'm skipping this because these are terms we are familiar with, so I'm sure I'm not making a big mistake. Okay, now let me give the methods of analyzing cross-sectional data. So sometimes you will confuse the particular method which you use to collect it, particularly those who use this survey research design. Beautiful set of data, very beautiful, present is so beautiful. Then you don't know what to do. You ask excellent questions. You scale the response very, very very beautiful set of data, but they draw nice. What kind of analytical method you have that you know? And look at this one, I have a lot of mistaken adapt. I won't invest. So if you touch data, it is very rare. Sorry, if it is post session, then your research methods But over time, people have developed these ideas of structuring the questionnaire to enable them generate data that is suitable for, say, cross-sectional OLS regression analysis. And it goes particularly to favor, say, business administration that would usually generate cross-sectional. So if you're using chi-square, nobody will accept chi-square at certain levels, not for masters, not for PhD. Even for PhD, the supervisor will just like 5 videos, 5 objectives. Okay, or you say the same as that. And someone is calling that attention that no, it's not good for this. It's rather manual, and you don't know anything about it. Or you Z-test or test. Oh, these are charges that students will pay when they have generated a beautiful set of data. And it is for us as supervisors, even in our own research, because we might not be restricted to details of these things I'm explaining when we do journal articles. But you support these things in the background before you generate good journal articles. If you have not resolved some of these background issues, there's no way we generate good journal articles. We were conference with Chibus participated in the talk at what we did was let me participate in that one. We were looking at the intra-regional trade and COVID. Eventually, you know that COVID was only for 1 year, and we need to do good analysis so that we convince. We collected data from 2015 to 2020. It was difficult for the funder to accept the result. They kept telling us that COVID was just only for 1 year. How could you say you're doing COVID and you're using 215 to 220? It makes no sense, and I agree with, even though I did it, but I surely knew from the beginning that to get over this, let me add more data, because you can't do analysis with only 1 year. Yes, you can do cross-sectional, but the number of countries involved was so few that you can't talk about cross-sectional. And that's where I'm talking about if you collect your data using questionnaire, you may collect data from, I think, I don't know, very involved in the study we did on business growth in Ebony. Let's see, very involved. Okay, we're not involved. Business growth, where we collected data from about 3,000 small micro businesses. We just simply did cross-sectional analysis, because for every element you have 3,000 observations, so it's sufficient for cross-sectional. If I want to do, for instance, a study on the performance of companies listed in the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and we have over, say, 150 companies, I can do cross-sectional analysis because I have sufficient data. And that is where, for instance, I want to do a research on their performance during the COVID year. That was last year. I can do cross-sectional, but just only a year. And like the example I gave, if you add extra years, if you go back and add some other years, they will be like, why are you involved in this year? What did we know about COVID in 2019 or 2018? And the answer is no. So cross-sectional data sometimes can be cross-sectional method of analysis can be very, very useful and can cut across all the basic and advanced methods that you see in your statistical books or econometric books. So it does not simply mean, the message I'm trying to pass across is that when you collect your data using questionnaire, you're not bound or you're not tied to chi-square. You're not tied to Z-test. You're not tied to ANOVA or MANOVA or any of these other basic ones. But at the beginning, you must make sure that your instrument is structured to get you the kind of data that you think will be suitable in context and in form for the analysis you're doing. It's not when you ask yes or no, like normally we do all the questions, yes or no, true or false. You collect categorical data now. You will not collect any sensible data that could be fed into any advanced econometric or statistical tool. Now, sorry, let me just continue because for cross-sectional analysis, we can do regression analysis. And some of us who have approached cross-sectional data using regression analytical tools would agree that these are the commonest ones that you see. You see OLS, you see Probit, you see logistic, you see Probit. All these, each of them has its own peculiarities that makes it suitable for any form of cross-sectional data that you must have collected. Sorry, I'm going through this kind of to make it a point of duty for us, for any of these that you're interested in, is for you to read it up and see how it fits in the kind of thing you're doing. Because unless you are able to choose the right methodological approach, your findings will remain very, very unacceptable. It doesn't matter how beautiful, how rich your data is. What is important is the scientific validity and reliability of the data and methodology that you have employed. Then we have time series. We also know that there's elementary and we have elementary and advanced time series methodology. Some of us might be good at using advanced time series methodology. Sometimes when you collect your data, you're collecting data on say, unemployment rate in Nigeria, and it is spanning over 20, 30 years. Okay. The assumptions of OLS, which we generally know, everybody here knows, completely break down. The data structure, some people will say, oh, I'll do unit root test. Sorry, I hope I won't be speaking strange language. I'll do unit root test. I'll do all this. I'll do stationarity test. When you've done this, what does the outcome tell you? Does the outcome tell you to change your gear or to remain in the gear that you're operating with? Most of the times, the outcome of these preliminary tests will determine the method you're going, whether you're going forward or you're going backward. Okay, some people will do and say, oh, they are all stationary at level. The truth is that if you do your analysis, if you do your preliminary test, and the variables you're using are all stationary at levels, then you don't have problem. You use the OLS, okay? Most of the time, so you use that to justify your choice of OLS. Nobody will ask questions why you're. But the reality is that those variables would 95% of the time not be stationary at level. And most of the time, the variables will also not be stationary at the same scale. Some will be at level, some will be at first difference, some will be at second difference. And all these will join to inform the methodology that you're going to use. So if you find them to be stationary at level, then you can use OLS. If you find them to all be stationary at first difference, then you can use VAR. Okay. Sorry. I hope I'm safe. If you find them to be stationary at first difference, you can use VAR, right? But if you find them to be stationary at different, some at level, some at first difference, some at second difference, or case may be, then you may be approaching the other advanced technique like VEC model and so on. So the message is that the structure of the time series data that you have generated, if you're using time series methodology, will inform the method that you are going to use in the analysis. And this is important, particularly for those of us who would approach some journals for publication. Because there are things you will send, then it will be rejected even before review, what they call desk review. It will be rejected at desk. Because those basic conditions your paper is expected to meet, you have not been able to address them. Then we have the longitudinal data analysis. Again, this is another interesting area because most of the times we are data poor country. In fact, Africa generally, is a data poor continent. So if you're looking for long time series that you use for analysis, you won't get reasonable observations. And because it's difficult most of the times to get the size of observations that will inform good time series analysis, the panel or pooled data analytical methods are gaining some acceptability or some popularity. Because I mean, if I collect data from 10 companies for 10 years, I have 100 observations, isn't it? Which is good for analysis. So by the time you join the number of companies or number of elements with the number of time periods, or you multiply, was usually by multiplication, you gain more observations that will make for good analysis. And remember, these observations we're talking about reflect your sample size and population if you're using survey. If you have 10 years and you do regression, for instance, nobody will take you serious for 10 years. In fact, the rule is that if it is less than 30 years, it's not good for time series. Forget about the fact that in the past or even at present, you get away sometimes with less than that. But the truth is that it is difficult to generate sufficient data at time series for most of the issues that we always approach in our own researches. So if you learn these techniques of longitudinal or panel data, it will help you to solve some of such problems, particularly when you have to collect secondary data. And there are methods, of course. So if you get this, as you will, I assure you, these are the popular databases where you can collect some data that is very useful for analysis. I don't know how many of us are taking time to visit Bureau of Public, our Bureau of Public, Bureau of National Statistics, or National Bureau of Statistics. I don't know how many of us. In fact, if you visit it, you won't have need to spend money and time doing your own survey, because most of the issues you look for are already contained there. They do what they call household survey. And this household survey takes care of most of the household related research issues that we normally approach. They also do business survey. They do all this, and not just the National Bureau of Statistics. There are other agencies, like the case of World Bank I cited, the doing business, ease of doing business, and the enterprise survey. So if you don't have the time, particularly for our students, because most times, whether you like it or not, people don't collect data. But when they use questionnaire, they manufacture data, they don't collect data. And it's left between them and their gods. Not their God, or their gods. Okay? So you just interview or distribute. In fact, sometimes the irony is that some of us will give these things to students to distribute. And trust students, man. You give him questionnaire copies to distribute to fellow students, and you haven't mobilized him, and you think he will collect the right data for you. He will just fill the forms and return to you now, and there's nothing you can do about it. And in the end, when you capture the data, they will look so beautiful. And again, when you're using persons third party to collect your data, you have to be careful, because the third party requires reasonable incentive to be sincere and honest in the data collection, whether you like it or not. Even if that person is I don't know, even if as the dean is, you are a lecturer too, or assistant lecturer, and he wants you to collect data for him, the chances of your being honest in the process, unless you're motivated, is very slim. So when we use students to collect our data, we do that. Most of us do that, no doubt. But let's be careful and be sure that we should be in a position to provide incentive so that you hold people accountable when they bring the data. If you tell a student to collect data on small businesses in Ikwo, or to go there at the mine and collect data from the mine workers, and you don't give the student transportation, you don't give the student any incentive, even you yourself will know that your research, you're not being very sincere. The integrity of the research process is in doubt. So if you have the authority to send someone to collect data, please have the capacity to motivate or mobilize the person. That time, that money you could have spent to do it yourself, give it to the person, so that when the person comes back, you can ask questions. You can ask moral questions on what the person is returning to you. So, like I said, if you go through these databases, they are very rich. Some of them you will collect. If you also go to the World Development Indicators, for instance, there's no data on microeconomic elements that you won't find there. You find data on public expenditure, you find data on banking, you find data on international, everything that has to do with macroeconomics. You find data on that. And some of these databases are free, which is the good news about them. They are free. All you need to do is to know how to gain access. Some of them will require you to register, registering free. Anyway, there's a database that shows intra-country trade, for instance, how much trade, formal trade, Nigeria has with Cameroon, with Ghana, and so on. Okay, and it's called, I think, trademark or so. And so you have to register. Then there's an element, there's this one for IMF, International Financial Statistics. Some elements of the data are free, but you have to register. So you explore these databases that are free. You mustn't pay. Some of us will say, we think it's so expensive, you have to subscribe, you have to do this. Yes, there are databases you pay for. Like I was telling, there was this type of data that we are using. I was telling Chibuzo that where I collected the data, that they pay $2 million annually for the data. The institution paid $2 million annually for the data. And it's a huge database, and there's nothing you won't find there. But they have to pay. And someone will ask, why should they pay that amount? Because it's business. It's purely business. Upon that database, someone can attract grants of running into $10 million. So just a single grant has paid off for that. So I think, let me end the presentation here, and thank you for listening. I hope I made sense. Thank you.
We thank the Prof for that presentation. You can go back to your station, Dr. Charles. I want to also recognize the heads of departments of the two departments, head of Department of Accountancy, Banking and Finance, Dr. B.N. Okeze. You can get to the head table, and also the head of Department of Business Administration, Dr. Anthony Mwale.
Well done, thank you.
Please
thank you.
Get to the head table.
How you doing?
Yeah, have you listened to DVC? He has gone. I wanted us to take questions, but
when you're coming, you don't go through this.
Lecture was very interesting.
I just met something about I need to make a Prof. Let us go inside. The Prof will not come here. Okay, we are.
I want to invite the chairman of LOC to move a vote of thanks. While he comes, I want to refresh us on what we have tomorrow. Tomorrow is the main business and the opening ceremony, which performed by the Vice Chancellor, Professor Sunday Elon. The opening is by 10 o'clock. I know that our visit keeps to time. So 10 o'clock is 10 o'clock. Let us be here. We'll be having interesting speakers. Of course, the lead paper presentation will be delivered by Professor Aminu Maman from the University of Manchester, United Kingdom. And his topic is on African philosophy to the rescue. It will take a global village to find a cure for global pandemics. This is the topic we'll explore. We also have first keynote speaker, a renowned scholar, former vice chancellor of 2 universities, the University of Nigeria and Soka, and the Federal University Oyo Ekiti, our contemporary. And I'm talking of Professor Chinedu Nebo. He'll be talking on assessing issues of sustainable economic development in the light of Nigeria's energy crisis. The second keynote speaker is another global scholar, the pride of AE-FUNAI, Professor Chukwumerije Okereke, who is the Director, Center for Climate Change and Development, AE-FUNAI. We'll be talking on green and sustainable post-COVID-19 recovery in Africa. And of course, it will be capped by the presentation of the third speaker, and in gender balancing, we will take a woman for the third speaker, Professor Salobomi Ajibolade, Head of the Department of Accounting, University of Lagos, Nigeria. She'll be talking on COVID-19, SDGs, and sustainable economic transformation. After the presentations, we will now go into parallel paper presentations, and that will mark the end of the event. So remember 10 o'clock, as I call on the chairman of LOC to take the closing remark. Dr. Mpo.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joe. My dear sir, once again, all protocol duly observed. You're welcome, sir. Our dear colleagues and the participants to this auspicious and wonderful conference, I hope you are not disappointed in today's occasion. The 2 pre-conference presentations, I'm sure you are going with some takeaway. And tomorrow is going to be greater. Indeed, God is a progressive worker, and He's going to use the erudite scholars and professors that have been mentioned to convey some new knowledge and new thinking paths in the issue that we are discussing in this conference. So please, let's keep it a day tomorrow. Those of our colleagues and participants that joined us online, do well to join us by 9 a.m. tomorrow. From 9 a.m. we'll be up, but the opening ceremony will start proper by 10 a.m. And that will be on time because we have a number of things to do tomorrow. Once again, I want to thank each and every one of us on behalf of our dean who is here present and members of LOC. And he said, as you are going, may the good Lord guide you all through and bring you back here safely tomorrow in Jesus' name. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. We will eventually draw the occasion to an end with a closing prayer. And I call on the HOD, Accountancy, Banking and Finance, Dr. Okezie, to lead us in closing prayer.
Shall we rise? In Jesus' name, gracious Father, we want to appreciate you, for it's by your grace that we are here. We are not in any way better than our friends that are rushed to the hospital, even some that are in the mortuary now. For you kept us, for your love, we weren't consumed. Thank you for the grace of the occasion. Thank you for your presence. You started with us, you were with us, and here we are coming to the end of the session. We are not dispersing from your presence. Rather, we ask that your presence go with us. Thank you for the rest of the activities of the conference. Thank you for tomorrow. We know is in your hand, that you have taken charge and control. That even our invitees, as they shall be coming, Father, the angel of your presence will convey them safely to this place. Thank you for the presenters at one level or the other. Thank you for your grace, and thank you for the wisdom that you are giving unto us. Blessed be your name, for our prayer is in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. As we disperse and reconvene tomorrow.